Good afternoon. I'm Rusty Cunningham on behalf of LeaderEthics. It's my honor to welcome you to our latest forum on election integrity. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks to Rick Kite and our hosts and partners at Viterbo University. Election integrity is key to democracy. This isn't the first time LeaderEthics has hosted a bipartisan public discussion on election integrity featuring members of the two major political parties. And so far, we've had no casualties. In the spirit of civil discourse, I'm sure civility will again rule. LeaderEthics is partnering today with the Democracy Defense Project, which is led by a bipartisan group of former elected officials and leaders in 8 states, including Wisconsin. The group aims to defend the transparency, safety, security, and validity of our nation's electoral system. The Democracy Defense Project is dedicated to publicly defending those who have sworn to uphold the rule of law and will be an active voice against any individual or organization that would look to undermine unlawful election processes and outcomes. The group believes it is time for those who know better to speak up. We are honored today to have a couple folks with us who are no strangers to lacrosse, certainly no strangers to public service in this state. We're joined by 2 board members of the organization and wonderful public servants who have deep roots in this state, Democrat Tom Barrett and Republican J.B. Van Hollen. Tom Barrett has served Wisconsin as a state representative and state senator, a 5-term member of the U.S. House of Representatives, a 5-term mayor of Milwaukee, and most recently as ambassador to Luxembourg for 3 years from the United States. He is an attorney and graduate of the University of Wisconsin Law School. J.B. Van Hollen served as Wisconsin Attorney General from 2007 to 2015. Born in Chetek and raised in Delta, Mr. Van Hollen is an attorney and a Republican who served as the Ashfield and Bayfield Counties District Attorney before being appointed as the U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Wisconsin by President George W. Bush. He then was elected to 2 terms as Wisconsin's top law enforcement official. He is a graduate of St. Olaf College and also the University of Wisconsin Law School. In a moment, I will ask each of these distinguished public servants to share their thoughts about election integrity. Then, I will ask questions about their work. Then it will be your turn. You all have a little piece of paper. You have a pen. And as you're listening as we get going here, please write down a question that you would like me to ask, give it to one of our volunteers, and they will bring it forward. Now, let's hear from our speakers. Mr. Van Hollen, thanks so much for joining us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I think you're very well spoken for a newspaper man. That's impressive. You know, you always hear that I had a face for radio. You've got a voice for the newspaper.
I do.
I don't know. It's a pleasure to be here with Mayor Barrett, Ambassador Barrett, whatever you want to call him, man of many titles. And it's a pleasure to be able to serve with him on the Democracy Defense Project board. I've had the opportunity to serve on this board for a number of years now. And it's very similar to other groups that I've served on in the past. As was mentioned, I've represented with current Attorney General Josh Kaul, bipartisan voices on election integrity in the past. Issues that I think are very, very important to most of us. I think you would find very few people in the general public who don't think election integrity is one of the foremost things that we need to focus on in our society. And I actually think you will also find most people have trouble pointing out issues with election integrity. The biggest problem that I believe, and I think those of us in Democracy Defense Project believe, is that we're suffering from a gross lack of information. And I think you can say that on a whole lot of topics in politics and government and society, but specifically on election integrity. We have been able to go out in the field a couple of different times with polling from Democracy Defense Project, which indicate what our general public throughout the state of Wisconsin believes are problems and what they believe our strengths are when it comes to election integrity. And we have found that of late, those numbers of late, meaning as of a year ago today, we're about to go out with our third poll, the numbers are increasing. People are having growing confidence in our system and growing faith in the way our elections are run. It's very interesting to note that the general public believes very strongly in the folks in this room and other people who are running their local elections. They believe you're doing a good job. They recognize that you're doing a nonpartisan job, very important job. They have great respect for the people who are working the polls at a local level, yet they don't necessarily have a belief that we have election integrity, which seems to me to be a bit of an oxymoron. And a lot of that comes down to the fact that they're just not informed as to the way our elections are run. And when we have so much misinformation out there, and it comes from both political parties, of late, certainly a lot more from my party, which has probably given rise to everybody's desire to finally step forward and try to inform the public a little more. I really strongly believe in what we're trying to accomplish here. We're trying to set forth a message to the general public about how secure and safe our elections really are. We're going in the field with polling at least once a year to have some empirical data to back up what we're telling the people. And when we do it from a bipartisan approach, such as Tom and I are doing here, I think it gives us an awful lot more integrity when it comes to being able to convince the media and the public at large that what we're saying perhaps actually has some merit.
Terrific. Mr. Barrett, it's great seeing you back in La Crosse. Please share your insight.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm honored to be here. It's always great to be in La Crosse, and it's very nice today to be with JB as well. And I want to begin by complimenting both JB and Scott Klug, who are the two Republican members of the board. I think we recognize that we live in pretty partisan charged times right now. And quite honestly, I think it could be harder for a Republican to be talking about these issues than a Democrat. I'm in the opposition party. We're trying to play the role that the opposition plays. But a lot of the political noise of this is coming from Washington, D.C. And I share with JB the sentiment that our elections, and I say this as someone who was a mayor of Milwaukee for almost 18 years, they're run locally, they're managed locally. Most importantly, the people who run these elections in large cities, small cities, villages throughout the state of Wisconsin, they are unbelievably committed to fair elections. That's been my experience witnessing this over the last 40 years, is that the people who make the decision to work in the elections on election day or prior to election day are unbelievable patriots from my standpoint who care about democracy. And I think that message gets lost. And all you have to do is talk to some election clerks from around the state who feel more threatened, more beleaguered, more challenged than ever before. And I'm thinking they're trying to do the Lord's work, and we should be there to support them. So when the opportunity came for me to get involved in this, I jumped at the opportunity because I think it's so important that we do everything we can to not only support the people who are doing this on not even annual, sometimes there's 3 or 4 elections a year, on a regular basis, but also to make sure, as JB has said several times, we have to educate the public as to how the system works, because the biggest source of information really comes from people not knowing. And so we want to make sure that we're putting as much sunlight as we can, because sunlight's the best disinfectant, and people will know that we have fair elections. And that's what we all, Democrats and Republicans, want to have.
Both of you have a long and distinguished career in public service, and you also share the fact that you drove 3.5 to 4 hours today to get here. So why continue to serve? And why does this issue matter so much to each of you? JB?
Well, for starters, I've got an old truck that probably wouldn't work if I didn't use it once in a while. So I had to stretch the legs and drive it down here today. You know, public service, obviously, for the both of us, obvious to me anyway, is something that was really ingrained in us and is important to us. There are a lot of people who run for public office. A lot of people do it for varying reasons. I truly believe with my long-term knowledge and relationship with Tom that he has done it for all the right reasons, and I like to believe that I have done so as well. So that's not something that just eludes you and goes away when you leave elected office. You still want to hopefully do a few things to try to help along the way that you think you possibly can. There are a number of areas where we perhaps can lend no more of a helping hand than anybody else when it comes to public service, but this is an area where I think we can take our reputations as a Republican and a Democrat elected to higher offices and the experience that we've gained from those positions and actually make a difference. And there's not that many people who are in a position to be able to do that. We both believe in election integrity. We both, I think, believe, correct me if I speak incorrectly about your opinions, but correct me more gently. But I think we both believe that the lack of civil discourse in politics and government right now is a problem. I think no matter which way you go, Republican or Democrat, there is a lack of civil discourse when it comes to this huge issue of election integrity. And so when we have an opportunity because of our past experiences to come forward and do something like this for the public, I think it's a great opportunity to be able to do something in our waning years, more waning for some than others.
Well, thanks, JB, for that lead-in. So for me, it's very personal. My wife loves to do projects around our house, and I don't. And it really doesn't work well if she's working like she is today in the backyard, and we have a sunroom, and I'm inside reading, and I can see her working, and she can see me reading. It's just not really good. And so when I learned about this effort, I thought this is right in my wheelhouse. Because, as JB said, we have a long history of working with the public, and we believe in it, and so I jumped at the opportunity, as I said, to get involved in this because I think it is so important. I think it goes right to the heart of our democracy. And if you believe in our democracy, then you have to stand up and say, this is working. This is working. I don't think there's a person in this room who thinks that our elections would be run better from someone who's in Bethesda, Maryland, than somebody here. And so we have to have voices out there who say, no, there are problems and there is discord, but this is working and we have to continue to support this. So that's why I wanted to be involved in it.
One of our big challenges is that trust is in short supply, and I don't care if it's with people in politics, journalism, clergy, educators. Polls continue to show that trust is eroding. Clearly, there are a lot of allegations questioning election integrity, never mind that most are unproven. Are you confident that you can convince voters to be confident in election results?
I think it's a continuous process, and it should be a continuous process, because if people let their guard down, and if people start getting sloppy in running elections, then of course the trust is going to be eroded, and it should be eroded if they're not run well. So I think that the people who are doing, again, I'm going to keep going back and back and back to the people who do this on a regular basis. I come from Milwaukee, which gets a lot of criticism because we have this central count mechanism where we cannot start voting and we cannot start counting the absentee votes until election day. We have tried continuously to have that law changed, because I can tell you this as the former mayor of Milwaukee, I don't like having our results in Milwaukee come in at 2 a.m. I don't like that. I'd rather have them come in at 10 o'clock at night, just like a lot of smaller communities. But the fact that we cannot start counting what sometimes turns out to be tens of thousands of votes until election day creates problems. And that creates a lot of distrust. We're the big bad city. People want to think something bad's happening. But it's not just the counting of the votes. The way the system works right now is that all of these votes that come in through absentee votes, the mail-in votes, those envelopes cannot even be opened until election morning. So what happens? At 7 a.m., you've got the workers, sometimes dozens and dozens of workers who come and start opening these ballots at 7 a.m. You're looking, can I have a witness? And then they have to make sure that they're done correctly. So you're checking the addresses. It's all part of the integrity of the system that's occurring throughout that entire day. Then when you get it done, then you start counting them, then you have to reconcile them with the polling places. So all of this takes time. We felt, and I think clerks around the state felt, well, let's use some common sense here. Don't even count the ballots the day before, but let's get all that paperwork, or as much paperwork done as we can, so that you don't have this continuous fire drill in the middle of the night. That's been defeated time and time again, because I think there are some people who want to cast doubt on the election. And I think it's imperative that we do what we can to say, let's improve the system. It's not a perfect system. Let's see what we can do to improve it. So again, it's part of the education process that JB is talking about. We want to educate people, like, let's fix this problem once and for all. But I can tell you this, in 2018, when Governor Evers won the election, in 2020, when President Biden defeated President Trump, I remember being in Milwaukee. It was 10 o'clock at night. Both times the elections were very, very close. And I said to the people around me, I can tell you what the outcome's going to be, because Milwaukee, which is 71% Democratic, is going to dump, how they would describe it, dump these ballots at 2 a.m., and then you're going to have people crying foul. Let us get it done at 10 o'clock, and then you don't have all this drama. But it's shocking to say that there's politics in politics, but there's politics in politics.
Indeed. JB, how do we get people more confident in the system?
I think we're doing it kind of from a couple of different directions. As we've talked about numerous times, we're trying to take occasions like this to educate the general public. In addition to things like this, Tom and I do Zoom calls, we do radio appearances, we do separate television interviews, we do everything we can to reach out to the general public and say, hey, you know what, we do know how our election system works. We have researched the various claims in the past. We have read a bunch of the research, and we, from a bipartisan perspective, tell you that we have election integrity. If you go out and cast your vote's going to count. And we can give you a very good assurance of that. But the flip side is we are also then listening to what the people have to say about what their concerns are, what their misinformation is. First polling data we had asked about voter ID. Well, of course, voter ID has been in place for quite some time now, and a whole lot of the respondents said, I would have a lot more confidence in our elections if we had voter ID. I mean, that's a pretty significant piece of lack of information. Either they didn't vote, so they don't know that they had to show an ID, or they don't recall that they had to do that because it was somewhat of an insignificant occurrence in their lives. But we've had an opportunity to learn what we need to educate people about, but also people inform us what is giving them concerns. We then have the information to turn around, armed with what the people are thinking, and give that information to our legislature and other people who have an opportunity to make a difference. We've heard Tom talk about the issue with mail-in voting in Milwaukee County, and it happens elsewhere as well, and where the law actually prohibits them from opening those envelopes and processing them earlier than election day. Well, that late counting and late turning in of the vote tally is the #1 issue in our polling that causes mistrust amongst the voters. Very few of them realize that it happens because the law is requiring Milwaukee to do it in a way that's going to have it come in so late. When we have voters who are saying by 70% that they'd like to see that changed, suddenly you get the attention of legislators in both political parties who realize, wait a minute, we can sign on to a piece of legislation and try to advance that piece of legislation that's going to make a difference in voter confidence. That's one other thing that we're doing in the Democracy Defense Project, is we're actually promoting legislation that we can all agree on from a bipartisan perspective that will increase the confidence that voters have in our election process.
I'm awfully glad to hear references to questions about Milwaukee. You have to understand, I grew up in a journalism family in Illinois where on election night, when the question is how many votes are still to be counted, the answer is, well, it depends. How many do you still need? LeaderEthics promotes the pillars of truthfulness, transparency, unifying others, and serving all constituents. We recently gave an annual award to Jenny Dankmeyer, La Crosse County Clerk, who is a model of integrity for clerks in our region and statewide. She has done a marvelous job of speaking to a multitude of groups about the election process and all the checks that go into coming up with accurate voting results. I know your group wants to pull back the curtain on the election process, as you've discussed. Can you give us what steps specifically you're talking about?
Well, we're really promoting the fact that we both talked about already about how elections are run. They're not run by the federal government. They're not run by the state. They're run by localities. They're run by localities under a very strict set of rules and requirements and procedures, all of which are there to protect your vote, and it works. And the interesting thing is that we have clerks such as the one that was just referenced here locally, who are elected, a lot of them on a partisan basis, in both political parties, who are doing their jobs, and they're doing them very ethically. And we're trying to point that out to people, and we're trying to make sure that people recognize that they're at the front line and they're your friends and neighbors. They're the people who you might even be working with as poll workers. And that they're doing their job, they're doing it well, and they themselves are the ones who are really eliminating any ability for people to steal an election in the state of Wisconsin. We want to make sure people are aware of that and aware of the fact that I think in probably every municipality, they will take you and walk you through the process if you called and inquired and asked them for the opportunity to see how the system works. We've done a number of panels like this around the state over time. We frequently have a clerk or two clerks with us to explain how the process works as well. So we're trying to pull back the curtain by bringing people up front and center who are actually doing the work.
Tom?
So let me explain what I think one of our big challenges is. Last month I did, not with JB, but with Scott Klug, the other member on the Republican side. We did a conference in Oshkosh, and it was a pretty large conference. And when we walked into the general room, there was maybe 80 people in that room. And they had two breakout sessions. I don't remember what the other breakout session was, but our breakout session was entitled, How Elections Are Run in Wisconsin. And I looked at that title, How Elections Are Run in Wisconsin, and I thought, we're going to be lucky to get 10 people in this room because it's supposed to be boring. I said, you should have called this Sex, Scandals, and Elections. You would have that room full, but if you say to someone, I'd like to spend an hour explaining to you how the elections work in the state of Wisconsin, most people are going to say, "Oh, I'd love to help you, but I'm changing my bird cage that time." You know, it just is not exciting. By design, it's not exciting. And again, this is where I get to the passion, the quiet passion of the local workers. What I have experienced is that the local workers who do this take this very seriously, and the best guarantee that we're going to have fair elections is that we've got clerks, sometimes in Milwaukee the average age is 85 years old, who are running these elections, and you can bet your life they're making sure that everything is done correctly as it goes from the municipality to the county. And then you've got people at the county who are looking at it to make sure that it's all done correctly and that everything is reconciled. And they have real ownership stake in this. And then it goes to the state. So you've got layer after layer after layer of review from the bottom. The grassroots, this is a grassroots effort that's getting stronger. That's why this whole philosophy of let's have it come from Washington, in the polling that JB referred to, there are still some concerns about how elections are run, but there is a lot more confidence in having them run at the local level than at the state level. So I think it's again, getting that message through that these are people who are your neighbors, who go to church with you, who have worked with you, who have gone to school with your kids, that are doing this. We can trust this more so than someone who's again, in Washington, D.C. or suburban Washington, who's never been to La Crosse, or has never been to Bayfield, or has never been to Milwaukee. That's where we have to continuously make the effort to say this is how democracy works from the local level.
And there's no,
To pick up on that very briefly, it's just little stories. So I live in a very, very small community in northern Wisconsin now, and I grew up there, and so I know everybody in the little area. And several elections ago, I'd seen we have 3 ladies working the election, same 3 all the time. Saw one in church on the Sunday before election, had breakfast with 2 of them the day before the election. I show up at the election and they say, "Hey, JB, good morning, how you doing?" And then I walk up to them and they say, "ID, please." They take their job seriously.
they really do. And again, there's no grand internet hacking that gets in the way. It's on paper. And just to put in perspective, how many towns do we have in Wisconsin? Something like 1,269, all with clerks.
Approximately?
Approximately. Now, that's before today's vote in Campbell about whether to become a village, so I might be off by 1 or maybe 2. Just a reminder, if you've got questions that you want, pass them to the center, please, and our volunteer extraordinaire, Mike Dernan, will pick them up and pass them along. Tom, your work as an ambassador helps provide an international perspective. So is the United States still regarded globally as a model of election integrity?
Well, let me just say, first of all, I was very pleased. I was in Luxembourg for 3 years. I was an ambassador of President Biden, and I was honored to serve him. I was honored to serve the State Department, but most of all, I was honored to serve the people of the United States. It was an amazing experience. As I would tell the people in the embassy there, I'd say, you don't understand. I'm used to having people yell at me in bars. That's what the job of a local official is. Why don't you have the snow plowed or the garbage picked up? So this was much more genteel. I also was blessed because Luxembourg, which has there's a heavy Luxembourg presence here in La Crosse and La Crosse area, which was exciting for me to see as well. But I was in a country where I experienced American exceptionalism at its peak. And what I mean by that is this is a country that 80 years after World War II ended remembers the sacrifice that the United States soldiers made in 1944 to literally save that country. And the busiest week of the year for me by far was the week of December 16th, which was the week of the beginning of the Battle of the Bulge, where small community after small community after small community would have memorial services where they would by name identify American soldiers who had saved their country. My wife and I commented to each other, we think that the people in this country might like the United States more than the people in the United States like the United States, and I'm not exaggerating. So it was again, one of the greatest, if not the greatest honor of my life, or where I've never felt prouder to be an American. So they did, wondering, in all candor, as we went through the election system, they thought that President Biden was too old and just not with the program, frankly. They didn't like President Trump, to be honest with you. And there were a few people, this will show you that they weren't 100% in tune with American politics, who would say to me, well, you should run for president. And rather than laugh like you're laughing, I simply would say, oh, in America right now, I am way too young to run for president. And then just get off the conversation. But they have a great, great, great respect for the United States. And I will say this, again, just to give you a little education on this, if you don't mind. Every U.S. embassy has an election night party for the presidential election, regardless of who's going to win, and they don't know who's going to win. Because of the time difference, our election night party started at 7 a.m. in the morning. And rather than have it in this fancy hotel, because there's a lot of fancy stuff in Luxembourg, one of my workers at the State Department said, well, why don't we have it in a sports bar? Because there's a lot of TVs, and they'll be happy to serve us breakfast. So we had it in a sports bar, which worked out very, very well. But when the results came in, I, as the ambassador under President Biden, had to give the speech, in essence, the concession speech, if you will. And I really did feel this way, that I said, I can't speak to what the United States relationship is going to be with the European Union. I cannot speak to what the United States relationship is going to be with NATO. But I can say I feel very confident that the United States relationship with Luxembourg is going to remain very strong, because it's built on three incredibly strong pillars. The first pillar is that historic tie where we made sacrifices, Americans made sacrifices to keep the country free. The second is there's an incredibly strong economic tie between the two countries. And the third is our values are the same. I think now, quite honestly, they're asking the question, are our values the same? From what I've been reading subsequent to that. I'm an eternal optimist, and I think that there's pendulums in politics, but I don't know that they feel that way right now, just to be very honest with you.
Thank you. JB, you were kind enough to join us as Attorney General, as former Attorney General in 2020 during COVID with Josh Call, who is the current Attorney General. It was a LeaderEthics forum, and that was the last time we've gotten to chat. I've had the honor of chatting with both of these gentlemen a number of times over the years in my role at the Tribune. JB, I'm wondering, from your perspective, is public perception of election integrity better than the last time we chatted 6 years ago, or worse?
Well, I have to start by saying that I kind of feel bad for Tom because he had to serve in the war-torn country of Luxembourg.
Kept us out of war with Luxembourg.
Yeah, whereas I, as a Republican, served for 8 years in Madison. I think I had better odds of being damaged there physically than he did. But I think that it is something that has ebbed and flowed lately, the trust. I think, generally speaking, it's something that people didn't put a whole lot of thought into. I know that when I was Attorney General, a big issue, of course, was whether we needed photo ID for voting or not. I had great information at the time that there was voter fraud that would have been resolved or not exist had we had photo ID. Since then, we've gotten photo ID, and I believe, even though I know there is still, to a degree, some fraud out there, it has diminished dramatically. And because of that, I think we did have somewhat, for a while, an increase in confidence in our elections, because those who were against photo ID, I guess you could say, didn't necessarily think we had as bad a problem with the elections as people do now. Those people who believed we needed photo ID certainly became more confident after it was instilled in our law in the state of Wisconsin. The problem then came along with numerous elected officials from both sides of the aisle, and I'm the first to admit President Trump being the worst. I'm a huge, huge supporter of President Trump, and I agree with him on many, many things, but I'll be the first to admit that crying foul when it comes to election integrity has been very, very damaging to the electoral system and to our country. So I think at a time where we had not so much concern, it raised a little bit and then it lowered after we got photo ID. I think after all this rhetoric, the confidence that the general public has had in our system has really eroded. We have seen in our polling empirical data that in double-digit percentages that has improved over the course of the last couple of years. So I think that now that since a lot of the concerns have had a chance to be investigated, had a chance to be aired and argued on both sides, and groups like ours have had a chance to help educate and inform the public, that confidence in our electoral systems has increased.
We have some great questions from the audience. I want to ask one more quick one. The FBI is interviewing people in Wisconsin about the results of 2020. Should we be comforted by that or concerned?
So for somebody who obviously I was a United States attorney for years, and as Attorney General, worked closely with the FBI a lot over the years, know what their roles are, know what their duties are, strongly believe that based upon the the concerns that have been raised and the answers and investigations that have already been made to, I think, alleviate those concerns, that there are a lot of better uses for our FBI resources right now. So I don't think that that is a great use of our resources. Should we, however, be concerned? I don't think so. I don't think the FBI is going to turn out and fabricate something, and if they, for some reason, uncovered something that we hadn't known in the past, by all means, we want to make sure to enforce our laws as well to make sure that people have confidence in our election systems. So is it something that I think is necessary? No. Do I think we should be concerned? Not necessarily. I think the greatest issue of concern is, my understanding, I think they were talking to individuals from Milwaukee County versus the city of Milwaukee, which is exactly the wrong place for them to be looking, so they're not off to a start that should give us a great deal of confidence.
So several weeks ago, I saw a great picture of Governor Evers holding a nice fish. It was opening the fishing season. And I think that's what we're witnessing right here is fishing season, because this is a fishing expedition. And the 2020 election has been litigated and relitigated and relitigated over and over again, and nothing has changed. And as JB alluded to, the fact that they went to the home of the county election executive, and the only reason that the county's involved in this is a lawsuit that was filed some years ago that was dismissed, and so the ballots still exist. But I do, and I don't want to sound at all defensive about this, but even in 2020, I thought it was interesting that the president wanted a recount only in the two main Democratic counties, Milwaukee County and Dane County, because it feeds into the narrative. It feeds into the narrative that he's trying to create.
We have lots of questions that involve, shockingly, money in politics and the impact on that. Let me boil down to one that I think is an important thing for you to answer, if you could. How is the Democratic Democracy Integrity Project funded? And how much is being spent by any group to counter false claims about election integrity?
The Democracy Defense Project, to my understanding, and I'm not in it at the funding level, but to my understanding from talking to our handlers, so to speak, is that it started out being funded by a group of individuals, largely one benefactor who happened to be a Republican. And that it has grown over the course of the last couple of years into a nonprofit organization, which is funded by obviously contributions and the like. And that obviously helps to give it more credibility, I think, when it's operating as a nonprofit. But interestingly enough, since so many of the complaints about election rhetoric in the past have been complaints against Republicans, that it was actually, to my understanding, initially primarily funded by a major Republican donor. I don't know if that addressed the question.
So I'll address that
Thank you.
From a different angle. When I was approached and asked to be part of this, I thought, who are these people? I didn't know that. I had seen an article back in October, and JB or Scott, one of the two, and one of the other members had been quoted, and that's when I took notice of it. I thought, well, that's something I would be interested in. I didn't know anything about it. As it turned out, an opening occurred on the board in December, and that's when I was asked to join. But I wanted to make sure I wasn't buying a pig in a poke when I was joining the organization. So the first thing I did is I went to the website, and I have to say, I was extremely impressed when I looked at the other 8 states, or the other 7 states, and the people who are on the board, from former governors, former senators, former members of Congress. There's a former ambassador who had been a member of Congress as well. And I thought, okay, this is legit. And then I asked the questions and got the same responses that JB gave in terms of the funding. So that was a question that I had, because I'm thinking, who am I signing on with? I feel much more comfortable now, having done that research and seen the organization, that it's very clear what its mission is, and that's to restore confidence in the integrity of local elections.
And then,
elections.
and then Tom called me. I said, "Oh, it'll be fine, Tom. Really."
So you mentioned the number of states, 8. One of the questioners asks, why only an 8? How are you doing at getting this in more states? Because this is an important issue.
Well, this
throughout
came
the
up at the
country.
last time I spoke, which was the Milwaukee Rotary, and it was pointed out it's actually 8 swing states. So you're going to look at it's where the action is. I think that it's resource driven, that they felt, okay, you're going to have the most action, positive or negative, in those states that are the most purple. I think that's how they, maybe you know.
No,
more
I
than I
mean,
do.
I agree. It started out in 8 swing states and largely picked those states because that's where the concern of the general public is greatest. I think people don't necessarily scream about election integrity so much when the same party is going to win all the time anyway. As a matter of fact, our polling has suggested, very not surprisingly, that when a Democrat wins the election, the Republicans complain that we don't have election integrity, and when a Republican wins the election, the Democrats complain we don't have election integrity. It's unfortunately just a crutch for some arrogance out there, perhaps. But I think, from what I've been told, is now that there is greater funding, that there is an effort to expand it beyond just these 8 states as funding permits. So I think it started for those reasons, and hopefully will grow.
There have been a couple of references to early voting and some of the questions that come out of that. One of our audience members asks, what's your viewpoint? Should there be early voting?
I'm very comfortable with it. I think if the safeguards are there, people have different schedules. I think if you're a working mother, if you're elderly, if you're a student, I like people being involved in our democratic system. I'd say it's the ultimate participatory sport, and it works only as well as we, the people, make it work. So I am not troubled by it whatsoever. Obviously, I think, and this is one of the issues we're working on at the state level, I think we would be better served if we had a consistent set of rules, for example, with drop boxes throughout the state of Wisconsin, because some communities embrace them, others don't like them. And I think that's a legitimate statewide issue as to how that should be treated. And I think some of these issues need to be addressed at the state level. You don't want local municipalities to have different rules.
The goal of our system is to have as many people who are entitled to vote actually vote. We want higher voter turnout. We want to have a representation of the people. Some people would argue that shouldn't be a goal, but bottom line is that is the goal, and it's the stated goal of our system. And so we're going to have a better turnout if we have early voting. And it is not a new thing. Absentee voting, I don't know when absentee ballots started. They've certainly been around my entire life, and as long as I can remember, that is early voting. Those ballots are cast before the election. They have to be received before the election. I have voted absentee a number of times. It is a pain in the butt, and it's a pain in the butt, I think, for the election officials to have to deal with that. It causes a whole lot more work right now on election day in Milwaukee County and in other places. To the degree that we can take these frequently very poorly compensated local election workers who are trying to do the right thing and make their lives a little easier by hopefully having some early voting, versus anybody who wants to vote early actually casting an absentee ballot because they couldn't make it on election day like they have in the past. We're making the system easier for them, and we're also making it easier for people who want to vote and perhaps miss the absentee date, can't make the election, who knows, any number of reasons, and Tom mentioned a few of them as well. So I don't think it's a new thing. Don't think it's a novel thing, and I think for both the voters and the election workers, it's a good thing.
So just as an aside,
Please.
in tiny little Luxembourg, which will never happen here in a gazillion years, you can't have spending on elections until a month before the election. So you want to control
Spending.
money, you want to, obviously we've got constitutional limitations, but it was interesting to witness that. It's like, oh, and it's funny, I didn't hear a lot of complaints about that.
Several questions, not surprisingly, deal with gerrymandering. New York Times this morning ran a map that showed who's winning, who's losing in a variety of states. It may seem old-fashioned to kind of like the notion of the voter picking their public servant as opposed to the other way around. But clearly, gerrymandering is a real issue in this country, in many states, and it's one that I would argue may hinder the confidence people have in election integrity. Is your group going to tackle that at all?
You know, I doubt it. And I doubt it because it's not really an election integrity issue. It's not the actual elections themselves and the people's confidence in them that we're addressing. Basically, we're addressing, you know, what the districts are that people are running for office in. So it's kind of out of our wheelhouse. We're trying to stay very focused on what it is we're trying to accomplish. If we get too broad, we're going to lose our message. We're also trying to stay very focused on things that Republicans and Democrats on the board especially can agree upon. We could actually probably could agree on gerrymandering because it's a very bipartisan issue in the Republican states. The Democrats are complaining about gerrymandering and the other way around. And the parties in power in both parties have been doing it for as long as I can ever remember. That being said, I personally think it's one of the biggest problems we have in government politics today. I can tell you from having been in office that the extreme polarized Democrats and Republicans are the ones that make it hardest to do our job, I think, from firsthand experience. I can tell you when I say polarized, I don't mean necessarily on the issues. I consider myself about as conservative a Republican as you can get. I'm talking about the ones who don't believe in compromise, who don't believe that other people should be able to have opinions and you can share in those opinions, and the list goes on and on. That sort of, I hate you because you belong to the other member of the party is a big problem. And I had people who were extreme, polarized, outspoken Democrats who would say you're horrible just because you're Republican, and the Republicans would say the same thing because I wasn't going to give an opinion that was based in politics versus based in the law. And those things made things very difficult. As we gerrymander and we make more and more districts more and more solidly Republican or Democrat, and fewer that get elected by people in the middle, I think we create an even bigger problem with that. But that is not a statement of the DDP, that's a statement of the JBV.
Well, everyone here, this seems like a very educated audience, and I just remember in middle school or whatever it was, when I first learned of the term gerrymander, which is the derivation obviously comes from salamander, because it looks like a salamander, and Governor Jerry from Massachusetts, who was, it's named after, I think it's the governor of Massachusetts, because he was doing it. So we know it's been around for hundreds of years. I think what we've witnessed in the last 4 months is sad for our democracy. I think there should be, once every 10 years, there should be a census, and there should be, as dictated by the Constitution, there has to be a census once every 10 years. And I think the practice that we had of having the redistricting follow that makes sense. Those guardrails have been torn down now. And my fear is they were torn down by President Trump, and the Democrats are going to tear them down wherever they can. And so the guardrails are gone, and that for people who want to have 24-hour news stations or 24-hour politics, they may love this. But I don't think it's healthy for democracy.
Could you two explain the notion of ballot curing, what it means, and whether it should exist?
JB looked at me, I think, saying, well, you take this one.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, you take this one.
Actually, the State League of Women Voters
Yeah.
has filed suit about this very issue.
I'm not up to speed on that, so I would be guessing as to what they're talking about. I apologize.
Ditto.
Good. Ballot curing is when a clerk will get an absentee and it may be missing something, an address, a signature, and they're resolved to fix it in the spirit of giving people their voice. But some, with all the jurisdictions, some do it one way, some another. There are probably 1,269 different ways of doing this. Do we need restrictions or rules on what happens? Because I personally feel that clerks want to do the right thing, want to give people their say. I don't see anything necessarily nefarious, but clearly there are questions.
So if I could, do we have a clerk? I'm looking to see if there's a clerk here. And this is a real world question for me right now, because I'm helping a friend of mine get nomination signatures. And I see it most often for the community, where it'll say MKE or MILW. And I'm thinking, okay, do I cross that out and write in Milwaukee? Do I leave it that way? Is that an acceptable? And I'm sure we have the same thing in your neck of the woods, where someone will have an abbreviation for a community or town, and the same thing is going to be happening here. And then I go down the rabbit hole, and I'm thinking, okay, you're going to say no, MILW, that doesn't count. That's an abbreviation for Milwaukee. Well, then the lawyer in me gets persnickety and says, well, 1756 North Highmount, the N, that's an abbreviation for North. You know, so are there no abbreviations? Are there some abbreviations? And I don't know that there, I think that is, again, the curing issue becomes a real world issue. And I think the law says you want people to vote, try to give them the benefit of the doubt.
I think the problem that we're having, and you know, I'm very familiar with the issue. I never heard the curing term used in the past. The reality is that somebody who sits here vehemently opposed to more laws and more regulations is going to tell you we need more laws and more regulations. As we get to the point where things like this come into question and it's causing people to have questions about the integrity of our system, we need to have standards that are employed. Bottom line is it's an issue right now because there is no clarification within our laws, rules, and regulations in the state of Wisconsin to say what's permitted and what's not permitted. Right now, with regards to nomination papers, those are issues that are handled by the Elections Commission when those papers get turned in, and then there are disputes over those that are once again solved by the Elections Commissions and maybe ultimately resolved by the courts, which creates some law to help them make the decisions in the future. Litigation obviously can create law, as I mentioned it has in that case, but I think we'd rather have our elected representatives create the law versus having our courts do so. So I think it is a concern because just like when you talk about ballot drop boxes, whether you're for them or against them, if we're going to have them, they should be uniformly used throughout the state or uniformly not used throughout the state. It should be the same with ballot curing. The same standards should apply to every clerk, and then we're not going to have issues as to whether they were going down the wrong rabbit hole or not.
Last question from our audience. How in the world do you balance sore winners, sore losers, and freedom of speech in competitive elections?
Well, I've had the advantage, unlike JB, I've had the advantage of winning elections and losing elections. And I can tell you it's a lot more fun to win an election than lose an election. But I think, and I want to use this maybe as my closing statement as well, when people ask me how everything's going, my response is, well, other than the world and the nation, everything's going great. And I sort of feel that way. In my personal life, things are good, and I'm troubled by what I see in the world. I'm troubled by what I see in the nation. And recently I watched a documentary on Vietnam, and it talked about 1968. Almost all of us remember 1968. And I'm thinking, as tumultuous as a period as this is right now, looking at 1968, when Martin Luther King was killed and Bobby Kennedy was killed and the Vietnam War was at its high point and the drugs were, this almost seems a little tepid compared to 1968. I hate to say it, but it doesn't feel that way for those of us who are living through it right now. I think what's most important, and if I can have a message here, after being involved in public life and public service for 14 years, I am proud to say that I have retained my naive optimism. I think that this experiment that we're now celebrating 250 years later is an experiment that we have to continue to be engaged in. And I think to the extent that we hear voices from the right and from the left who are trying to tear it down, they're trying to keep us out of the game. And as I said before, the game works only as well as we, the people, make it work. And so I think part of the reason JB and I are doing this from different angles is we are not going to let our spirit be broken by whatever negative noises we hear. And we're fighting to make sure people understand that our elections are fair, that we've got dedicated people who care about this, and whatever criticisms come, if they're real, we'll address them. If they're not, we're going to just keep moving forward. But don't give up. Just don't. You can't give up. And I have kids who don't want to get engaged. Don't give up. Don't give up. And that's what we have to remember in our democracy.
Well, and I think people do have relatively short memories of our history, and they think we're in the most tumultuous time that we've ever had, and you know, government is more partisan than it's ever been. Our founding fathers shot each other. They dueled. I mean, it's not, our newspapers back then were blatantly on one side of the political aisle or the other. We're certainly not in a more divisive state than we've ever been. We've been divisive throughout our entire history, and that's with a purpose. With regards to the exact question about, you know, freedom of the press and the sore winners and the sore losers, we've always had them and hopefully always will. We want people to run who are passionate about their beliefs, who are passionate about the issues, who are passionate about whether they win or lose. Nothing less fun than playing a board game or a game of cards against somebody who doesn't care whether they win or lose, takes all the fun out of it. The bottom line is we want people who care. It's going to make the system, continue to make the system work. Do we like it when President Trump, or dare we forget, Hillary Clinton will come out and say the election was rigged and it was stolen from us? You know, they have both done it. We have sore winners and sore losers on both sides, and it's their right to say what they will about it. But it's also our obligation as the general public to stand up against those things, be educated against them, and realize that he who has the bully pulpit isn't always he who has the most knowledge. We as the general public make up our minds, and we help elect our leaders based upon that. And so I don't think there is a contention in that question. I think it's a necessity.
Agreed. Before we wrap up, please join me in thanking Tom Barrett and J.B. Van Hollen.
Good job, JB.
Now please welcome,
I think we.
now please welcome our founder and executive director of LeaderEthics, Lee Rosh.
Thanks, Rusty, and you just do a great job in moderating these kinds of events.
Yeah.
You do. And I want to offer my special thank you and appreciation, JB and Tom, for what you're doing. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for being the people you are, to have your insight and your knowledge and your willingness to take time out and to come out and talk to people about this and protect the investment that we have. We have been through perhaps difficult times in our history, but you know what? You have to keep working on to protect that. They just don't, they're not on autopilot, and it takes workers like you, dedicated people like you. Thank you. Thank you. So I just want to take a couple of minutes and talk about one of the initiatives that LeaderEthics is involved with, and that is our commitment to promote civil discourse. And I think what you heard today is very much in alignment with what we're promoting here. And we recognize that in the absence of civil discourse, it just feeds fuel into the increased distrust that we have for each other. And it causes a breakdown in trust not only in the systems, like our election system, but in our relationships with our family and our friends and coworkers. And so this is a very high priority for us to be promoting us to bring back a better understanding of mutual respect, respecting differences, but also respecting the right to have those differences. Now, you might be thinking, with the things that are going on in Washington today, how could you be talking about civil discourse? And that's just the point, because we need to be talking about it here. in this community, in our communities, in Wisconsin, and in surrounding states. Because this is where we can understand the best impact of that. And we can also know there are tools out there. There are things you can bring in people, you can bring people together, there are things that we can do if we focus on communities. And that's why we believe so strongly that this is what we need to do. I kind of think of this image in my mind. Picture yourself swimming in the ocean, and you find yourself on a beach area, and you find yourself caught in a rip current. And it's pulling you out there, and it's much stronger than your ability to swim back. But you're going to look at the beach, and you're going to try hard to get there, and you're going to try to overcome the waves to get there. And tragically, that's when people don't make it. But they tell us if you go parallel to the beach, you'll find that there are areas where the current isn't as strong, and then you'll have a chance to come back. And when we talk about trying to focus on community, that's exactly what we're talking about trying to do. That's what we're trying to do. Get the conversations going here, in our church groups, in our service clubs, in our places of business, bring in people to help us with that if we need that. So what can you do? Well, one thing you can do is you can support our effort and sign the pledge for a call for civil discourse. And we have it available. It's online right now. And it just says two things. The first thing it says, it's in the wheelhouse of our U.S. Constitution to promote civil discourse. And we're not expected to agree. We're expected to respect each other's differences respectfully. And the second thing is we expect our elected leaders to be good role models for that. And that's what it is. And you can go online, LeaderEthics.us, and you'll find that it says the call for civil discourse. If you want to scan that QR code there in that poster, you can do it. It takes 2 minutes. And you'll join hundreds of other people who have already signed on to that. And what we're doing with that, we believe, is that we're saying to the public, to elected officials, that we're voters. We're political donors. And we expect to have our voice heard and respected as well. So I want to thank you again for today's program. This was really insightful. Thank you so much, and thank you for taking time out of your day to be here. Best wishes. We may have the reporter stayed around. So
Yeah, I see that.